Hey everyone, so we just had an absolutely fantastic chapter come out for a variety of reasons. Number one being that a very, very interesting idea that I've been talking about for months now seems to have just been partially confirmed, which is that there are multiple concepts of the sun god, and that Elbaf seems to believe in different variations of the same god. Now this is absolutely huge because, as I've talked about in past videos, such as the video about Blackbeard potentially killing Loki for the other sun god fruit, I believe in the existence of an additional sun god fruit aside from Luffy's, and that is now clearly supported by what we learned of in chapter 1136, that because the giants have different concepts of what Nika is like, that means that there is very likely different versions of the Nika fruit. If you go back to Vegapunk's explanation of how devil fruits are created, this is pretty much explained beat for beat. What you have to understand from Vegapunk's explanation is that it does not matter what the actual Nika is like, or even if an actual Nika exists. In fact, Vegapunk makes it very clear that we don't know if Nika actually exists or not, but that's not relevant. Devil fruits aren't about what actually exists. Devil fruits are about what people imagine. Devil fruits are born when enough people imagine a certain thing, and then that concept comes to life in the form of a devil fruit. So, if you have a civilization like the Giants, where a large number of them seem to believe in Nika, this laughing warrior god of liberation, but then another large portion of them seem to believe in Nika, this god of destruction. Guess what? It doesn't matter what Nika is actually like. We don't even know if Nika actually exists. What matters is that the moment you have these two very distinct separate groups of beliefs and very separate concepts of the Nika god, there are going to be two separate devil fruits. That is what Oda is setting up here. That is the devil fruit that Loki ate. It is the counterpart to Luffy's devil fruit, and I encourage you to check this video I dropped about how Blackbeard is likely to take Loki's devil fruit, because Blackbeard is the god of destruction. He is all about destruction. The Yami Yami no Mi, the Guru Guru no Mi, and finally the zone that he has been waiting for, the sun god fruit of destruction, because that is what Blackbeard has always represented, in contrast to Luffy, who has always represented liberation. This is the final symbolic showdown that we're going to get at the end of the story, and this is why there needed to be two different sun god fruits to symbolize the two different directions the will of D could go. One being the right direction, which is Luffy's, the god of liberation, liberating the world and bringing the dawn, and the other being Blackbeard's, the god of destruction, destroying the world with the dark sun god fruit. But first, we have the most beautiful travel posters we've ever made for you all this January. This month, you can get a fantastic watercolor imagining of Fishman Island, as well as Saboti Archipelago, Weatheria, and Elbaf Village from the Sun Realm. The posters are printed on matte paper, hand cut by the artist himself, and you can get all four together for 50% off each poster. You can also still get the deluxe package if you want to appear on my streams, and in that case you can choose any poster from 2024 as well. So if you want Fishman Island, Saboti, Weatheria, and Elbaf Village for your walls, just hit the link in the description below. All posters from 2024 will also be available in the complete original set bundle. So a ton of stuff was set up with this chapter. Let's wait and see how things play out. But even aside from those reveals, I am just loving Elbaf so far because of how Straw Hat-centric it seems to be. Yes, we have new giant characters, but they are setting the stage for the Straw Hats to shine, rather than dominating the story like the countless citizens of Wano did with all the samurai and Hiyori and Shinobu and yada yada yada. I love the scene of the Straw Hats just showing off to the giants. It was very Whiskey Peak-esque, where every Straw Hat's getting their own little panel to shine and show off, and Usopp's getting to lie, and Sanji's getting to flirt with women, and so on. Robin's already got a storyline set up with Saul, Frankie's got a storyline set up with the Atom Tree and how that pertains to the Sunny, and most importantly, we've got the core trio back in action. Luffy, Zoro, Nami. Every great One Piece storyline, aside from the Marineford Saga, begins with this trio. This is the core of One Piece. This character dynamic is really what the entire story kind of kicked off with, and Oda tends to go back to it in pivotal storylines to begin said arc. I'm going to be talking more in depth about how important this dynamic is and how underappreciated it almost is in next Tuesday's video, so watch out for that. But anytime you see this trio of Luffy, Zoro, and Nami being separated out together to have a little bit of a plotline together, you know that big things are around the corner, and we have an entire series worth of evidence to look back on to prove that. So seriously, watch out for next Tuesday's video, because I just love this character dynamic so much. But the character to look out for right now is really Loki. I believe that Loki is shaping up to be one of the most important and interesting characters ever in One Piece history. The build-up that we're getting for him right here is very Oden-esque, with us being told many tales of what a menace he is, much like in Oden's introduction we were told many tales of how how in childhood he did this and that and basically was the terror of Wano. And in reality, Oden turned out to be a pretty great guy, and he had an unfounded reputation that did not actually represent who he was. It is very likely that Loki is set up to be a very similar type of character, with Luffy even commenting, oh, so he's a good guy, with the Giants being like, what? No, of course that's not the case. But at the end of the day, Luffy knows best. Loki is a character who is very likely set to subvert expectations, and he is set up to very possibly be one of the most well-written and tragic heroes in all of One Piece. The line that he gives us at the end of the chapter about how a warrior does not face death with fear, but rather embraces it, that is a huge, huge, huge death flag for this character who wields an extremely important fruit that, again, a character like Blackbeard is probably set up to have in the end game as a symbolic contrast to Luffy, and you are going to hear me continue to talk about BKL, Blackbeard killing Loki, for likely the rest of this arc, so watch out. But in general, I did really enjoy Loki's interaction with the Gods Knights, seeing that he does have a friend that he clearly loves and cares about, the Wolf, but at the same time not getting so worked up over the Wolf's death, but rather basically saying, well, this is the path that we walk as warriors. I'm not going to cry about this. I'm going to let this fuel me for what I one day do when I get out of here and destroy the world. I think that's a very interesting idea because it paints Loki in a very unique light that we haven't really seen from any One Piece character before. It's very possible that Loki's going to be more morally gray than many other characters in One Piece so far. I also want to shout out Primo Showtime for correctly guessing that the Gods Knights are going to encounter Loki this chapter. And as for the Gods Knights, we finally got a debut of some of their abilities. So Gunko seems to have abilities that are related to maybe a mummy type ability or something like that. Maybe a mummy zone if I had to guess at the moment. Nothing crazy, but of course we're all interested in the evil Shanks. And what's interesting to me is that this Shanks seems to have actually a very similar demeanor to the Shanks that we know. He's very calm, more reserved and patient, and he doesn't act hastily. And actually, if I go back and look at his dialogue with the Gorosei, that seems to reflect that sort of persona as well. So while I was thinking that maybe that this could be a sort of, nasty, cackling, evil version of Shanks, it's almost more interesting if they're fundamentally very similar in temperament, but this one just has a totally different philosophy and sense of morality than the good Shanks that we know. I think that makes for a far more compelling villain. I think that makes for a far more compelling villain than, say, a Stelly to Sabo sort of relationship. And finally, we have a voice from the people, my top tier of patrons. So Jay made a very elaborate point that I find interesting and is just straight up too long to read out, but he essentially drew parallels between Loki and Viper, Kyros, and Odin, and that they're all hypermasculine warrior figures that are the core character of their given island. I personally agree with this to an extent, and it is a trope that Oda likes to fall back on quite a bit when we come to islands that are in need of salvation in some way. However, I do think that Oda twists the concept quite a bit each time to make it fairly different. I'd say Viper to Kyros is the most similar sort of copy-paste dynamic, with Kyros being, in my opinion, a much neutered version of the greatness of Viper. But I could definitely see Loki being very similar, but with a lot of Luffy also infused into him. So all of these elements definitely make me feel that Loki is a character that Oda has planned for a very, very long time, and I'm very excited to see the direction that his story goes and what type of character he ends up being. I still believe in BKL. But that's all for this week, and I will talk to you all later.